Well, welcome back to week 7 of Summit. We are so glad you're here, and we're so excited to be able to kick this off. I have my wonderful co-host, Ben Mekis is here.
Hello, everyone.
And we are going to be kicking off, and this week's going to be talking about discipleship. So hopefully this will be a quicker one. We are experimenting with some stuff, but this is a new week for Summit. We didn't do it last time we did a Summit. So this is a little new, and I've spent a lot of time with Pastor Craig trying to understand the complexities, but also the simplicity that happens inside of discipleship. So today I'm going to be talking to Ben about what it looks like and how we want to encourage it to grow inside of TAB. So today, Ben, my good man,
Yes.
we are going to talk about, well, starting with just what is a disciple. Let me set this over here. Mm-hmm. And so when I started doing a lot of research, one of the things that came up was a disciple is really just a learner. Mm-hmm. And so it's a pretty vague term. We attach it a lot of times to Christianity, but there's disciples for everything, every religion, really. Or it was kind of a common term back in the day. And so a disciple was, you kind of had to have this sort of humble posture and follow people. And you see this playing out in the New Testament where Jesus was called rabbi. And there was also a lot of other people that were rabbis at the time. And becoming a popular rabbi was kind of like being a biblical influencer. Mm-hmm. I think that's I just came up with that, so that's new. If it's bad, we'll cut it out. But yeah. And so, like I said, there's a lot of disciples all over the world, and it really just means you're taking the time to learn from somebody. Mm-hmm. And I think Pastor Will was one of the ones that mentioned it's very close to apprenticeship, and I think that captures it really well. But I also think that discipleship can happen outside of a relationship that's super structured and intentional, right? Because if you think like medieval times, apprentices were the people who would go and like live with this person and train under them for years, you know? And so their entire life was just dedicated to like learning a craft, whether it was like weaving or blacksmithing or wagon repair or all these different things. And so they spend a lot of time doing it. But we don't really have people doing that in the modern church. Like I'm not living with Pastor Craig for 7 years.
No, praise the Lord.
Yeah. And so like it's a little different. I do think that there does show some like intentionality about multiplying something in the apprentice model, but I don't think it's I don't think it captures everything perfectly because there's just a lot of interesting ways discipleship happens.
Well, yeah, and like as we've modernized like some of those, like you mentioned an influencer, but now like what you have to go through to become an influencer is so little. That bar of entry is so small, whereas like a rabbi or a teacher, someone that you would want to follow, you would obviously be close enough to them to understand their character. You've seen them respond to things, and maybe that's what heightened your interest to become a disciple of this person. So that all takes time, and something that our modern society is not as good at, just observing, watching, and then making a slow, calculated decision like, this is someone I want to be like. Let me be your disciple. You know?
That's a good point. I feel like we're so bombarded with information or people that are trying to be influential in some way.
Yeah.
Or not even trying to be influential, but they have become on accident by making some sort of statement or getting on a podcast or being mentioned by someone famous. That it's maybe we do need to take a step back and really evaluate the character. What people are really saying. Are they a person of character like we see in 1 Timothy that like Paul outlines? Like this is how someone who's a leader and should have a character enough that we can follow their influence operates, so therefore we can trust them, and that's kind of how we set up elders and pastors inside the church. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah,
very interesting point. That was a key insight.
Look at that.
But I think what it's important we make the distinction between just a disciple who's just a learner or a follower of some sort of philosophy to a disciple of Jesus. And so we're not just disciples, we are disciples of Jesus Christ. And so we see it in Mark 1 where he calls us two sets of fishermen. You know, it's who is it? Simon and hold on, I can
Garfunkel.
Hold on, let me get my Bible out. Matthew, Mark. I still say the song in my head of like the books of the Bible when I'm trying to remember. Do you know that song?
If it works, it works. I don't think I can get through it though.
Yeah, so Mark 1:16, it says, as he passed alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, Simon's brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Follow me, Jesus told them, and I will make you fish for people. Immediately they left their nets and followed him. Going on a little further, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat putting their nets in order. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat and with the hired men and followed him. So that's like the call out, right? Initially, is you see Jesus calling his first disciples in Mark 1. with just the simple phrase of follow me. I'm sure well, I'm not sure. I imagine there was probably a little more context given.
Well, also, like, if you think about it, if Jesus makes this call, you got this strange man that's coming up to you, like, maybe part of you's just curious. Yeah, they dropped everything and followed him, but I wonder if they, in the back of their heads, were like, we'll give this a week. And if you think about it, the first few months of their ministry was wild out of the gate. So maybe it wasn't even with the intention of let me drop everything and follow them. Like, I don't know. I'm speaking out of just an observation that could be. But I think as they realized just how special this is the Messiah, that their dedication just simply grew and grew. And as we can tell later on in the Gospels, like they pretty actively grew in their faith and their dependence on Jesus, even up till when he was given his life, and Peter then still doubted, and then he came back from the dead, and Thomas still doubted. Like, people are still doubting. But just the journey they must have been on was wild. So the fact that that's how it started is no surprise to me.
Very intense 3 years.
Very intense.
A lot can happen in 3 years. That's what I've learned from being in the military, going to college, even having a almost 2-year-old now. A lot can happen.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's 3 things we do want to point out that make a disciple of Jesus unique. And so the first one is learning from / following Jesus and his teachings. That makes sense. If you're going to be a disciple of Jesus, you should probably follow what he says. And also loving God. We see that is outlined in Matthew 22:37. And loving others, right? These are 3 things that Jesus talks about or illustrates or demonstrates that seem to set disciples of Jesus Christ apart from just being a general disciple. Like, these are the things that would make a disciple unique. And so discipleship is this process, the definition that we've distilled down is the process of continually growing in our understanding and application of Jesus' teachings, right? We want to, both of those are really important. It's not just understanding, it's not just applying, but it's the continual process of growing in both of those. And so the part of the goal behind Leaderpath is to create these steps that model aspects of Jesus' ministry that we can take people along. And so we try to put a framework around something that's complex and fills many books, and try to unpack it in a way that, as you kind of been experiencing through Summit, it forces you to grow, but it also simplifies some stuff down and allows us to have a discussion about it in a way. And so we, excuse me, the hope, that's what Leaderpath is set up to follow. And as we talk about discipleship, it's twofold. And so, like we said, it's understanding and applying. It's knowing the truth and acting on the truth. And it's being hearers of the word and doers of the word. Right? Yeah. So there's like this heart piece where you're believing and doing because you believe, and then there's this like head piece where you understand it.
That's kind of that big old argument, like Craig was talking about the sanctification, like, can you be a believer but not a follower? Or there's almost in the sense that your sanctification, the more you discover, the more you realize how like beneficial living out these truths are, and the reason that this is the only thing that matters, and that changes the whole way you look at your life here on earth. So yeah, I love that. That's hearing and doing. That's huge, because I feel like the hearing comes first, obviously. Yeah. But the doing is hopefully soon to follow if you heard some good stuff.
Yeah, and I think to your point, one of the things Pastor Craig mentioned when we were talking through this is discipleship in the West. We kind of have this interesting focus where we put such a value on knowledge that we want to understand, and then maybe we'll like do something, but we really want to get it intellectually before we move forward, and that kind of holds us back. And I felt that in my own life, where I'm like, I don't know enough to try and teach people. I'm still trying to learn it and figure it out. So how could I possibly disciple someone in a relationship? But in other cultures, he talks about, like in Chad, the gentlemen there have to be guarded because they will get like a little nugget of understanding and they'll run with it. You kind of got to understand a little more before you just start trying to explain this, because if you hear the one verse and you're like, that's incredible, and then you go to try to explain it, but you don't quite understand it completely. I'm sure you can imagine how uncomfortable that might be, where you're like, I actually don't know the answer to that.
But it was pretty cool when I heard it.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we came up with this disciple matrix. We looked at this definition. I don't think you've ever seen this before, have you?
No, I haven't, no.
Okay, sweet. This is a new experience. I get to explain it, and you get to tell me if it makes sense or not.
Okay.
So we took the definition of the continual process of growing in our understanding and application of Christ's teachings, and we put it on this matrix. I really like matrix. I like visuals.
Shape boy.
Yeah, I guess. But if you think about someone who's got low understanding and low application, so they don't really understand the teachings of Jesus, and they're not doing the teachings of Jesus, really, they're either an infant in the faith or they're lost. Right, so like
Yeah.
the starting point is kind of like is you as you begin to understand the teachings of Jesus. There's so many different aspects, but boiling it down to needing a savior, what Christ came and did for you, the sin that's in your life that you need to be saved from, and how it's our faith in Christ that allows us to rebuild the relationship with God. Like that's a low understanding, right? And typically there's not a lot of application that happens, right? Because you're believing, so you're not really doing a lot. You're believing. And so that's the first quadrant is low application, low understanding. And then the application, when you start moving towards higher application, but still have a low understanding of really the core teachings of Jesus and what he says, it's possible to move in towards, Pastor Will came up with the word humanitarian. Like you're someone who's doing the right thing, you're probably not doing it from the right source.
Yeah.
Or you're someone who's very legalistic. So you're like, you put a lot of emphasis on following the law to the letter. You're very specific, like we have to do, and you kind of miss the point, the heart behind everything. And so you're very focused on the doing of the faith, and so you might be almost in a unconscious way of trying to live out a works-based faith. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And also like legalism, I feel like in the regards that you understand like little pieces of like biblical truths in the sense, because legalism in my head means like I know the rules and I'm going to follow those rules.
Yeah.
But even in that case, like what rules are you following? Or were those really the most important things that we're supposed to be doing in our walk of faith? So I can understand why that could be a little bit sideways. So yeah, this makes sense.
And then I kind of think, as I think through like application, low understanding, I think it's almost a danger zone, right? Because if you do become an infant in the faith, and you try doing too much too quickly, right? Paul warns us about this, and he's like, hey, like the elders of the church, the leaders of the church need to be men who are firm in their faith, or mature Christians, because they could cause more harm than good, right? So the it's not really listed there, but being a high application, low understanding could be a danger zone for people who are so new to the faith, but yet they want to try and do stuff before they're ready. Like I think Paul describes it as like eating solid foods before they're ready. So like Paul says, I'm going to give you milk, right? So that way you as an infant, you can grow and learn. But on the other side of that, you have high understanding and low application. And this is, I think, to be honest with you, a lot of church cultures lean into this because it's a consumer Christian. They get it. They hear the faith. They've heard it every Sunday, but they're not really doing much. They might just be coming to church semi-consistently. They might not be generous with their time or with their resources. They might not be involved in a life group. They might not be serving. They're really just there to take.
Yeah. And that's almost in the sense, too, where they need to be given plainly an opportunity to do something. Like they wait till a church initiative happens. Like that's why we have this saying around here, tab on the go. Yeah. It's not just one initiative, but living a life on mission. So, yeah, I guess it's a lack of seeing that the mission field is at the grocery store or when you're getting your tire changed or whatnot, or that person that was sitting on the sidewalk who looked like they were going through it. Like if there was a little tug on your heart and you had a little time, then, that's living life on mission. So yeah, I can see that very easily in the Western church because we do kind of wait for big, fun, exciting initiatives. We want to get the picture with us with our red hairnets on and be like service. And then we go out and ignore everyone else, Yeah. So yeah, no, this makes a lot of sense.
I'm glad to hear that. Growing disciple is someone who's moving towards high understanding and high application, right? And so,
let me circle back right quick. Sorry.
Okay.
Not like doing any of those things are wrong. I do want to say that. Like, obviously, church is more powerful. Like, those initiatives need mass amount of people to organize and to be able to do, and they're effective. They're great. But the issue, I guess, is pressing pause after it's done. I just had to circle back because I want people to wear red hairnets next year and do our initiatives.
Yeah,
sorry, I might have derailed you.
That was a good.
That was a good time.
If you didn't come out last year, this year, if you didn't come out to the last one we did, make sure you come out to the next one. It was really fun.
Oh yes.
So high understanding, high application is I understand what Jesus taught, and now I'm doing it, and it's a growing disciple. And so you don't see discipleship on this matrix because it's the process of moving from one category towards growing disciple. That's the process. Right, it's taking the time to understand and apply the teachings of Jesus. So if you're maybe in that humanitarian or legalistic or in that danger zone of high application, low understanding, the path of growth for you is really understanding is what you need to do. Like that's how the discipleship is that process of growing So using the resources, the community, the people God put in your life to help you understand more, and that's part of that process as you're becoming more of a disciple, more, well, I guess a better disciple of Jesus. Is that the phrase? A more committed.
Better, growing, active, intentional.
Intentional is a good word. A more intentional disciple of Jesus. But if you're a consumer Christian, you're like, I understand it all. I know what Trinity means. I understand the hypostatic union. I got the teachings down. I've read through the Sermon on the Mount 100 times. Like, I got it. But I'm not really doing anything. Then you know that for discipleship, for you, part of that becoming a more intentional disciple of Christ is doing more. Like taking the time to put your resources, your time and energy at the feet of Jesus and say, okay, God, what are you inviting me into? Where are you already working and where can I go? And so that's where discipleship is on these quadrants. It's not it's not listed because becoming a growing disciple is someone who's moving towards understanding, high understanding and high application.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any questions about that?
No, I like it. And just like a reminder that if you're trying to put yourself on this matrix, that moving anywhere up or to the right is good. Like action in any direction. Like I know we have the support challenge matrix, for instance, like moving in a direction, but stagnation is kind of where the issue is. Yeah. So if you're feeling like, oh man, I'm doing a lot of works, but I really don't know what I'm talking about in these conversation opportunities, then you know that, okay, let me grow my understanding. And that's beautiful because you're moving forward. Yeah. So just an encouragement in that direction.
Yeah, and this is very similar to the support challenge matrix where sometimes you're bouncing between categories and it's not always perfect. And it takes time to evaluate where you are. But if we look at the definition, you can see in your life where you might be understanding but not applying, or applying but not understanding. And so it just kind of creates that simple process for you. But a big piece of this when we talk about discipleship is we want to, and this is a big piece of Pastor Craig's heart behind discipleship, as we talked about Timothy, we talked about leadership throughout the year, is that discipleship isn't only sitting inside a room at a table with your Bible open, going into a really in-depth study. Discipleship is more organic than that, right? Jesus, he lived with his disciples, and so the discipleship process is that intentional aspect of being in community with people and with the intent of pursuing Christ likeness, right? So the relationship of I want to become more like Christ, and I want you to become more like Christ. Let's do that together. And for me, this was a little scary because I was thinking through, I was challenged on Eddie Herrera. Yep, I've mentioned him a couple times now. He was like, who's your Peter, James, and John? Like, who are you trying to pour into, and who are you trying to encourage to be more like Christ? And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready. I think I need to be Peter, James, and John before I'm really ready. And I felt like that was me being a cop-out because I was like, do I have the time for this, right? A little self-preservation. Do I have the time for this? Is it really worth it? And I read through a section of the book by Greg Ogden, and he said that one of the ways to create a transferable discipleship process is not thinking through it in like someone has to be a teacher with all the theology degrees, and then someone has to be, a infant Christian. He's like, a lot of times what you'll see is in a healthy relationship is someone who's trying to pursue Christ and someone else who's trying to pursue Christ, and they're like, hey, let's just do this together. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's create this mutual dependency on each other to grow towards Christ likeness. And that changed my perspective because I was like, it's less daunting to think that I have to have it all figured out. And it's more about accountability. If you're trying to become better and I'm trying to become better and we both are going that way, we can do that together, Yeah. So that was the big piece for me. And so when we sort of break down the formal versus the informal, and I think you've probably seen this in your life where sometimes it's in the informal where you feel the most depth happening.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge one. Also, the most like active change, I think. Like I'm thinking of multiple times, like maybe it's the early phases of discipleship, but just like in a little example of this, for a while after church on Sundays when we'd find enough guests or guys, we would do what we call guys and chais. And we would just take them to the Cure in downtown Norfolk, and we get chai lattes because that's what men do. I would buy them for them, and I would talk it up, and then we'd get to know them on the car ride. We'd kidnap them, literally put them in our car so they were stuck with us. And some of those guys are some of my closest friends here at the church now. Some of them, because it's Norfolk, have moved on to other places and whatnot. But some of the conversations we had in there, were maybe seemed insignificant at the time, but those people have now grown into leaders at the church. Emmanuel Brinkley comes to mind. He was a chai guy, and he was over there helping out with. Yeah, he was a chai. Okay. He was the first chai and wives. He was like, "I'm bringing my wife," and we're like, "I guess we'll let women come." Chai and wives. Terrible. So it became guys, chais, and wives. Just briefly.
This is gonna get flagged on YouTube for that.
Oh yeah, I guess so. But either way, yeah, that's like, we never knew when we were gonna do that. We didn't plan. Like, we thought loosely, hey, if we found a good crew, let's go ahead and do it. But yeah, like my life group was talking about just yesterday, that if we leave opportunity in these margins for these informal conversations and interactions and relationship building, we'll never fully know the effects of that. But like, just a small story, a few summers ago, or by the time you're watching this, who knows, but we were doing we do Life Together summer interest groups, and there was a young adult crew that was doing pickleball, and a young man came up, was watching, and Eddie and Sabrina, good friends of ours, and they're in my life group, invited him to play. And not even 2 months later, he's getting baptized and bringing his family to the church. So that little, like, hey, you want to play with us, literally changed the trajectory of his life. Yeah. And that seemed probably so insignificant. Like, oh, this is probably the right thing to do. I should let him play with us. And now he's literally bringing his family to church. Like, that's crazy. And that was not formal. Now, of course, the formal piece is very, very necessary, because soon we'll see this family hopefully go through base camp. You know, they get the tenets, the foundation of faith, maybe trailhead later. And at that point, they're serving. This young man is already serving. I'd love to see his family get involved in that capacity as well. And all that from an maybe at the time insignificant informal conversation. So yeah, I think informal is like a huge piece of this.
Yeah, it makes me think of what we talked about yesterday, where influence is built on the foundation of trust, right? And that moves at the pace of relationships. And if you try to move too quickly in a relationship when you don't have any trust built based on your character, your chemistry with the person, your perceived competency and credibility, those are going to, if you try to move faster than the trust has been built, it might do more harm than good, right? So like that's what it makes me think of. Like the informal pieces we see as kind of insignificant at times, but there was a lot of trust being built in those spaces where it's like, let me, we're not actually kidnapping you. We're asking you to get in the car and taking you out to get chai lattes, and then
works though,
and then building that just opportunity to discuss, right? And some of the questions that they might ask that you might not see as super Christian, but they're like, so how did you come to Tab? How long have you been here? What brought you? Like, just some of those feeler questions, trying to understand your perspective, helps them gain an understanding of what Tab is like, and if they're going to be a good fit, like if this is where they're meant to be, or where God's calling them. And so I think it's the stories you have are incredible about the informal aspects happening and creating community, right? Like we talked about community last week, and that's really what discipleship is like it's an intentional relationship inside of community. It's not just a informal or formal Bible study.
Yeah. So don't switch off your intentionality ever.
And so not the last, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is Pastor Craig and I were talking about discipleship and Leaderpath, and how Leaderpath isn't kind of like plucked from thin air. Like a lot of this was very intentionally prayed over, thought over, researched, and the Leaderpath is realistically a Jesus path. Like we're trying to model Christ likeness as the goal. And so we're looking at these pieces of Tab's DNA, which is based on biblical truths. And we're looking at how Christ interacted, how his disciples interacted with people, what they encouraged people to do, what seemed to be these foundational pieces they laid. And that's what led us to build out the pieces we have in Leaderpath, these sort of checkpoints each week. And so DNA, Jesus has a mission. When we talk about our mission of sharing God's story, Jesus had a mission, and it was to seek and save the lost. And there was a lot of verses we could have pulled through. I didn't want to pull the hundreds of verses that we could have used to support these pieces. But so it's just a snapshot. But Jesus came here for a reason. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't just because it seemed like a good time. But he came to allow the sin of the world to be paid for, for the sense of justice and grace and mercy to be able to be lived out. And so we see that in Luke 19:10. And then also identity. Jesus was confident in his identity. And as I read through the scriptures, this is something I see over and over again. He wasn't unsure of who he was. He knew who his father was. He knew he was called to do. He knew he was there on a mission. And his confidence in those spaces, even with people that could have been putting him to death or tried to stone him, he was still like, no, I know who I am. I knew who God called me to be. And so your identity is a critical piece of that. If you know who you are, if you know who you're called to be, if you know what God made you to do, that's such a confidence, right? And one of the things that I shared with Summit, the group we were going through with this go-round, is that as I was praying through identity of like, okay, God, what do you call me? What do you challenge me? One of the things that came up was after having some father figures that wounded me in my life, having God the Father not just be this distant God, but being a present father in my life, being the father who looks at me and says, you're my loved son. You know, you're someone that I look at and I see you're struggling and I see you're trying to grow and I see you're going through these different things and he's walking alongside me in that. He's not kind of just leaving me to figure it out. And so that gives me so much confidence in the faith of like knowing that God isn't distant, but he's walking beside us and he's given us this mediator in the Spirit. And we see Jesus, he calls him, he uses the phrase I am, which is a pointing back to the Exodus account. And then you see him calling himself the Good Shepherd. And you see him calling himself eternal. Like he understands who he is, what he's called to do, these aspects that he shares with God. And so I think identity is a critical piece and it's such a foundational piece to start with. You got any thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I like identity is finding your identity in Christ. Is everything. The fulfillment you get in life, the purpose you get in life, like that's such a huge piece of this. I think Sarah and Tawana were talking about that, and I find that to be a big crisis this day and age, where comparison biases are through the roof with social media, and people are like, "Who am I?" in response to this person. While the gospel says we're nobody, but with Jesus we're everybody. I mean, that's an interesting way to put it, but Jesus plus nothing equals everything. And the peace that comes with in today's day and age is, I think, one of the reasons we're seeing some people explore this truth more and more, because just how you carry yourself with this identity is intriguing. And that's triggered a lot of conversation. So that identity piece is huge.
And the other piece of it is leader of self. Jesus led himself even in the uncomfortable situations. So when we talk about know yourself to lead yourself, sometimes that means stepping into an uncomfortable situation. When we talk about leading yourself before you lead others, it's this awareness of your identity. Excuse me, I got a burp. Nope, it's there. Okay. Sorry, we can cut that out maybe. I'm
gonna leave it all in for this version only.
So Jesus was willing to lead himself, set the example, even unto the uncomfortable, even unto death, right? He did the will of his Father. We can see that reiterated over and over and over again in the gospel. He's like, no, I'm not just doing this but because I want to, but because it's what I'm called to do. It's what my identity is. It's who I am, and it's the will of my Father. And he also did it to sacrifice for others, even to the point of death. Like that's the spoiler alert of the Bible, right? Where Jesus came and he died, but he also rose again. And that was an uncomfortable. And no matter how you package being crucified, whether it was, a bad weekend, as some atheistic scholars have argued, well, it just sounds like a bad weekend. That's a rough weekend, having the skin stripped from your body, your beard pulled out, being nailed to a cross naked, and then being unrecognizable as a human, and then getting stabbed in the side. That's rough, right? That's a lot. And to be able to confidently endure that, knowing that you're doing it for people is
and the people that are putting you on the cross.
Act
like he's saying that, forgive them for they do not know what they're doing. Like that's
I feel emotional.
It's radical. If you understand the weight of that, I know we're coming into the holy season, but the time we're shooting this, but like it's heavy to fully really comprehend that. So the fact that he did that, leader of self, and he sacrificed his self, shows like to the one who gave it all, nothing is really a sacrifice. Like we owe him everything.
Yeah. I'm getting teary-eyed a little bit.
I know it's
having kids softens you, man.
Dude, having kids is wild, y'all. I don't know how many y'all got them kids, but
that's funny. Yeah. So then the other piece is community, and we discussed this last week. And the point of this is just to reiterate how these are, again, we're not just plucking these out, but these are intentional steps we believe really reinforce what the Christian life should be like. And community is done in loving each other and caring for the least of society. And And Lewis, I always, when I think of community, I always think of Lewis. C.S. Lewis is his, in Mere Christianity, he talks about how in a perfect world, a healthy Christian community is almost socialistic, where it's like you're not holding things back from the community, but you're bringing everything you have, everything you can do to the community of believers. And at a time in like the New Testament, that was life changing for people, right? In America, we're very wealthy, even though we feel poor at times, and we're very fortunate, so we don't see that as much. But imagine you're in a place where you don't have the social system to support you, you don't have the governmental system to support you, you don't have even the emergency systems to come and help you and save you in difficult situations, or to protect you in difficult times, or provide you medical care, or provide you resources for food and all these different infrastructures we have in this society. And you really only relied on the people next to you. Like all you had was the neighbors you had. And in the Christian faith, like that was critical. That was life or death for some people. You know, they didn't have the systems we have. And so we're fortunate. We don't always think about it like that. But I think, as I'm thinking about it right now, I feel like when you look back and see how Christianity has always flourished under persecution. So when people were getting things stripped away from them because of their belief system, when Christianity flourished, it was because they would come together, right? They would love each other just as Christ loved them, showing the world who they were as disciples of Jesus Christ. And that was, you know, life or death at times for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you and Tawana did a phenomenal job on this video. So you got any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean that's my heartbeat right there is community, and trying to show people how good it can be, and especially as we see guests and people that don't fully understand by just coming on a Sunday or coming to an outreach event, just how good and beneficial it is. And it's almost like I want a fire hose, and the second I see him, be like, let me tell you stories of how this will, like, you can, I mean, this is a separate conversation, but there's like the saying, you can belong before you believe. And that whole sense of like seeing the benefits of Christian community and the support it comes with makes you realize that people are genuinely caring for you in a capacity where it's not worldly. And then that intrigues them to discover the gospel. Like, what is it that you have that I'm missing here? And because I know there's all the science stuff, but when you show the love of Christ, that surpasses, you know, all understanding, as it's stated. And that is just something we get to live into in this community piece. And I love it. I love my homies here at Tab. We have a good time.
Yeah, the comment you made about sometimes you can belong before you believe. I think, did you hear that from Eddie Herrera?
No, I heard that from Philip Mitchell, 2819. A lot of people say it.
Yeah. So Eddie's who I heard it from, and he was talking about like belonging is kind of what Jesus invited people into. And then he said then you'd have believing because of the, like you said, the influence you saw in the Christian faith, and then you would have behaving like Christ because of those steps. And he said sometimes behaving and believing can flip-flop. But belonging I think is critical, and I think people are looking for that today.
Oh, so actively. Yeah. Like we did that little cookout fall launch thing. We had so many first-time guests end up at people's houses. People are eager for community. It's the easiest it's ever been. We just got to create opportunities. So that's why my heart beats in that direction, because it's easy right now. It's easy. So let's do it, you know?
Yeah. And so the last one is discipleship. This is Jesus appointed disciples to learn and then go make disciples. And we saw, like we covered in Mark 1, he calls his first disciples. And then the Great Commission, he's about to ascend into heaven, and he gives them this commission to go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And so discipleship. So the point in all of this is that these are specifically designed to mirror steps Christ took with his disciples, with his people he was teaching. And so we just want to create intentional stops where we say, okay, let's think about this for a little while. You know, we're not expecting a miraculous change to happen between week 1 and week 8 of Summit, but just to have 7 or 8 different stops where we say, okay, let's really dig into this, let's process this, let's apply it to our lives. What's the mirror showing us? Is this applicable to me? Is this a growing point for me? It's just that's the heartbeat behind all of Leaderpath, really, but especially Summit.
Yeah.
And so the final piece is, who is cooking your breakfast? I came up with this title. I'm sorry if it's not funny. I thought it was funny. And
I think it's great, Daniel.
Craig chuckled a little bit at it. So
If Craig Chuckleton is not funny, I hate to break it to you.
Yeah. And so the idea behind this is like in John 18, Christ is getting taken away, and Peter denies him 3 times. And that's a heartbreaking part of the story, right? Peter, who was just like, I will follow you into death. And they're like, are you with this guy? And he's like, I don't know who that guy is.
Why?
Right? That's heartbreaking.
Sounds like us, though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But and then you see in John 21, we see Jesus rebuilding that relationship. And so Jesus is sitting down with the disciples. But before that, this is post-resurrection for Jesus, and this is like the 3rd time he's appeared to his disciples. But it's interesting because what you have is Jesus, he's standing on the seashore, and he's talking to the disciples about, hey, you caught any fish today? And kind of casual conversation. He calls them friends. He tells them to throw the net on the other side. And then they catch a whole bunch of fish, which is a shout out way back to the beginning of the gospel where he's like, hey, follow me. And he performs this miracle there. And then he cooks them breakfast. And then he asks Peter 3 questions. And I'm sure we kind of gloss over the Bible sometimes in missing the relational, behavioral complexities probably happening in these moments. And I'm willing to argue that the sitting around the fire with Jesus, knowing Peter had denied him, Peter probably felt really guilty.
Yeah.
It probably getting to him. He's like, oh man, I said all that, I hyped all that up, and when it came time to really double down, I chickened out, And so when Jesus is like, Simon, do you love me? And Peter's like, yes. Like I imagine that was very tense, probably very uncomfortable in that moment, And then he asks him again. Or he says, feed my sheep. And then he asks him again, do you love me? Peter's like, yes, I love you. Feed my sheep. And he asks him the 3rd time, and Peter obviously gets a little agitated. He's like, Jesus, I love you. And Jesus is like, feed my sheep. And like that's the almost undoing of the 3 denials of Christ. And I think we look back at that and we sort of, like I said, I think we overlook the complexities happening there. And yes, we can see, yeah, that was probably Jesus forgiving Peter, walking him back through that and undoing that. But I think we might miss the uncomfortable that Jesus was willing to step into for the sake of Peter.
Yeah.
And it didn't start with him rolling up and saying, hey, Peter, oof, buddy, what did you do? Right?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he's like, hey, starts probably comedic a little bit, pointing back to the beginning of the gospel, their first interaction. And then he cooks them breakfast. He's like, bring the fish up here. Come on, let's sit down, let's eat.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to open up the Torah. We're not going to show how you messed up with trying to follow the Messiah. He sits down, probably starts a fire, which probably takes a while. So
You think he was sneaky, though? They were coming back, and he was just like,
I don't know.
We'll never know.
I don't know.
The important questions.
That's what we really need to dissect. Yeah, and so I think that probably Peter's sitting there and they're talking and chatting and laughing maybe, and Jesus is over there making the fire and cooking the fish, cooking them breakfast, and then he goes to this challenging space, right? And the reason I think this story is important is because it captures something we talked about a couple weeks ago with support and challenge, since you already brought it up, is that Jesus supported his disciples through careful, intentional, time-consuming, and organic support. Like he was teaching them for years, making sure they had what they needed. He was taking the time to flesh out ideas. He was also masking some sentences in this imagery that left the disciples confused and probably aggravated Jesus. But he taught them, ate with them, walked with them. He modeled grace and peace for them. He let them see what it was like, and he cared for them, right? And he also challenged them to share the good news, right? The Great Commission is a pretty big challenge. Hey, and he's kind of been dropping these little hints, like this is gonna cost you, right? Following me as the Messiah is gonna cost you. Hope I got a burp again. Excuse me.
There it is.
Pick that up. Sorry. But he lovingly challenged them to pick up the cross and follow them. And it wasn't a transactional relationship. Like Jesus wasn't giving to get. I mean, what could they possibly give him, right? Other than relationship and other than their devotion. And so he carefully discipled them for years. And if you look through the lens of challenge and support, I mean, sure, there was times where he was spoon feeding them teachings. And there's times where he was like, okay, you got to now go do this. Go out 2 by 2, go share what you've heard, go do what you've seen me do. You have the strength to cast out demons and heal the sick. And it's like, whew, that was probably uncomfortable, right? It was probably very challenging. And so my question with all of that as we're thinking this through is, who in your life is supporting and challenging you to grow into someone who understands and applies the teachings of Jesus? And who are you supporting and challenging to grow into someone who understands and applies the teachings of Jesus?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's huge right there. Being able to get to that point in a relationship with someone else who's God-fearing and is able to push you in this direction, support and challenge, is a beautiful thing. And it's a beautiful place to get into relationships, especially within our Christ-centered community. If you have almost acquaintances that are supporting and challenging you. Like I have a lot of interactions on Sunday. I get a lot of comments and a lot of critiques as the elements of my job. But every so often I get really good encouragement that comes with like hey, did you think about this when you did this? And it comes from a perfect like a pure heart. And I'm like, wow, yeah, maybe I should do that next time or think that through. But it's packaged in a way where I can see the intent of their heart. And it's great because I wouldn't say I meet with them weekly, but just being in a community where people can offer this kind of feedback or challenge is a beautiful thing. Yeah. And it's something I think we can only see in the church, because outside you see people with their walls up, and it's really hard to, get past that, to be able to have a relationship where you can provide support and challenge. And it's hard independently to put your walls down to receive. It's easy to receive support though, but you got to be open to challenge, or else, you know. So, yeah, I feel like there's a beautiful culture of that, but we can press into it more around here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think part of the reason we're trying to articulate discipleship in this way is sort of to remove the glamour, like we talked about, like move that fear of like, oh, I'm not ready. I heard someone say yesterday, like, I don't feel ready to, and they're older than me, like, I don't feel ready to disciple anybody. Like, I'm still trying to learn, how could I possibly do that for others? And I was like, I wanted to be like, well, been there, done that, but I was just listened, right? But like that's the real fear people have. Like, what if I lead them wrong? And it's like, well, if you're following Christ, and you know it, right? And if you try to move away from that teacher mentality, but mutual dependency, and move that like scary aspect to discipleship, and then you start with support in every relationship, and then you move to challenge, right? You start with building the relationship, cooking breakfast first. That's the joke, right? Who's cooking your breakfast? Who's providing you support first? Who are you providing support first? Who's cooking your breakfast? I thought that was funny. And the hope in that is to encourage people to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, between Will and I, we've called a lot of people, encouraging them for gaps in our life group ministry, encouraging them to lead or facilitate, and all the conversation, almost all of them go the same way. They're like, I don't think I'm ready. And they put that think. So we're like, there's a glimpse of them that thinks they might be at least willing to try this out. And, 100% of the time, it has not happened yet where they step into the role and they call me a month later and they say, I want out. Yeah. But like the Lord meets you where you're at, and you're going to be given what you need to do the things that you need to do in that position. So I don't know. It's a beautiful thing to find your confidence in the Lord, even if you don't feel like your knowledge is there. The fact that you're worried about your knowledge not being there and you're trying to actively grow is kind of a testament to where your spiritual maturity is. Yeah. And obviously, none of us up here fully know everything about the Bible, know every little aspect of the gospel and how to communicate it perfectly. But we can lean on the fact that obviously we don't change hearts, but God does. And maybe just possibly we get to be used by God in different individuals' lives. And we may not fully understand the significance of that, but it is everything. So yeah, feeling inadequate to disciple someone, I feel like can be removed by stepping a little in faith, if that makes sense. Yeah. And you may be discipling more people than you know right now, just by the way you respond to people or the little conversations you have. The way you respond is a huge thing. So I don't know, maybe look around and see who those, I know we've been talking about this a lot through the different low-key leader sermon series, but you may have more influence than you think you do. And if you were to just be slightly more intentional with that, you might be surprised the impact you could have.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's why I said it. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm really humble, guys.
All right. So that's it. That is Summit Week 7. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have some great discussion points for Sunday or whatever day you're meeting for Summit. If we use this again, it could be any day of the week. You never know.
Yeah.
We try to keep people on their toes. But awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
See ya.
Okay.